This is a continuation of the lecture I began in class. This is concluding what we talked about with attitudes. We talked about how when we invite somebody, when we take something that somebody already loves and we use it as reward, in this case, pizza, and then we induce them to do something that they don't yet love, like read a book. And this is done a lot in the schools. And we tell them, if you read so many books, then you can have the pizza. What happens to their attitude? Well, first off, it's very likely that they will read the book because they're going to get the pizza if they do. So we're going to get a temporary compliance. They're going to read the book. But what is their attitude toward the book going to be? Well, their attitude toward the book is likely to get worse. They read the book so that they could get the pizza, and their attitude toward the pizza is likely to get better. So we have a goal of wanting them to read, and we're rewarding them with something they like, but in fact, we might be having the reverse effect. We might be actually, in the end, causing them to dislike the thing that we want them to like. So we have to be very cautious when we're using rewards to encourage a behavior, because the behavior that's being encouraged might be, in effect, they're going to enjoy that behavior less. Now, I say this, and I didn't speak in class, but we can put some caveats to this. So it's going to be best if the child can come to love reading because they're spending their time reading, sitting on your lap, and they enjoy the stories, and it's always fun, and they're cuddling and having a nice cup of tea or something like that, and it's pleasant. And they associate reading with pleasant things. That's going to be the best way. But let's imagine that we have someone who really has a struggle. Maybe they have a learning disability. Maybe, they're just not picking up on reading as well and they're behind the class, or maybe they had someone teaching them who was unkind and made them feel they weren't very smart with reading. Maybe something like that's going on. And so in that case, it might be helpful to induce them with an extrinsic reward for a while, until reading becomes easier. And then gradually phase out the rewards and replace the rewards, the extrinsic rewards, with the kind of rewarding behavior that comes from reading itself, those pleasures that we talked about earlier. So there's a place for rewards to help someone get over a hump, but we have to be cautious in how we use them. So, then we think about so many myths and fairy tales involve these kinds of doors. I don't know about Deneb stories, but I do know that I grew up with fairy tales, and there was always some, goblin who was saying, and you can go through any door but that one. And we all know what happened is the person wanted nothing more than to peek behind that door. I thought of, in the Christian tradition, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And in that early Eden story, the people were granted access to the tree of life, but forbidden to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that same thing happened to Adam and Eve in that tradition. They wanted nothing but to eat from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and eventually they did. We know that if parents forbid their daughter, say, from going out with a certain person, in this case, this girl is very interested in this boy, and maybe he likes her too, but her parents have forbidden it. Now she wants him all the more because it's forbidden. We know that we're tempted by forbidden fruit, and that sometimes if it's forbidden from us, it's like a train going round and round and round in our head. We can't stop thinking about it until finally we break the rule, we violate it. So remember, when you forbid something, you're making it bigger and bigger in a person's mind. And a better way is to get them to come around to making their own decision. Embodied cognition then is our next topic. And when we say embodied, we mean, in this case, we mean thoughts that are living in the body. So where do we carry our thoughts? Our bodies are not peripheral to our mind and cognition. How you use your body might change the way you think. So before I begin this content, I'll give you just a couple of examples. Think about how a person who is very confident carries their body. And if we were there in the classroom right now, every one of you could stand up and you'd put your shoulders back and you'd hold your head high, and you would be able to embody a very confident person. So as you embody that person, you might come to feel more confident. We can pretend. I think that that's what it is. And we pretend in our bodies. So we pretend to be confident. And if you take someone who suffers from a lack of confidence and teach them to embody confidence, they may become more confident by using their body in a confident way. Likewise, think about how someone carries their body when they're depressed. Their shoulders are stooped, their back is stooped, their eyes are downcast to the ground, their face is long. Could a person become depressed simply by carrying their body that way? And indeed, it can be true. And I've read anecdotal accounts of actors who have fallen into a state of depression because they played a depressed role in a play or a film. So we do have embodied cognition. Our thoughts manifest in our bodies. So this, and then how well do we interpret what our bodies are telling us? How well do we interpret the emotions that are present in our bodies? And that's what this next famous study is about, Misattribution of Arousal. It's Schachter and Singer are the researchers. It's an old study. And this bridge is, I think it's the actual bridge that's on this college campus. It's somewhere in New York, and now I've forgotten what college it is, but it's sort of a scary bridge because it swings and it's, it wobbles. So you kind of work up a little bit, especially when you're new to the campus and you haven't crossed it much. And so the question of interest to these researchers is, do individuals misattribute the source of their arousal? The independent variable in condition 1, males were assigned to this condition where they're going to be aroused. So males were approached by attractive female to participate in a study while walking on a scary bridge. So in both cases, the males are going to be approached by the same woman and asked to participate in a study. But in condition 1, they're going to be approached while they're walking on this scary bridge. So their heart might be racing a little bit because it's a little scary. And in condition 2, the males are going to be approached by the same woman for the same purpose, but they're just going to be on a sidewalk, nothing scary going on. So in condition 1, their heart is probably beating faster because they're on the bridge. In condition 2, their heart isn't beating faster. And the dependent variable, how do they attribute this heart beating faster? And so how are they going to measure this? They're going to measure it by looking at how many, and so this woman at the end is going to say, well, here's my phone number, and you can call if you want to get the results of the study. So the dependent variable is misattribution of arousal as determined by how many of these men contact the women when given her phone number, ostensibly to get the results of the study. And they eliminate people who are in a relationship and things like that. And they're using people who are new to the campus, like early in the days of college. And so this is the question: how good are we at interpreting why we're aroused over something? And so the result was that males who were approached on the scary bridge misattributed their arousal for attraction to the woman and were more likely to contact her. So if your heart started beating faster when you were with this person who was talking to you, you tended to say, oh, my heart's beating fast, I must really like this person. So that's how we're not good at it. And I thought about an early experience that I had, and it was when I was young, and I was interested in, I wasn't even interested in anything, but I had this opportunity to ride horses, and I hadn't ridden horses much before, except like, just pretty slow, mild things. I didn't have experience. And this was my first time riding horses in like the Badlands. And we actually, like, as soon as we got on the horses, we like ran them through a little river and up the edge. And, it was all very exciting. And someone even fell off their horse. So it was very exciting. And then I could almost relate to that experience because I was with someone who was a cowboy and with some other people as well. But I ended up feeling like associating that cowboy with that sense of arousal and, kind of liking that person for a while. So I can relate to that experience a little bit in terms of misattribution of arousal. My heart was beating fast, but I don't think it was because I liked this person. I think it was because of this kind of scary horse riding experience. So maybe you have something like that too. And I gave you an example just before we left class of I wonder if, you know, I tend to be afraid of, like, I'm afraid to go rock climbing. I think I'd be good at it. I think I probably have the strength and agility, but I'm too scared. And so I think that one thing I've done in situations like that is I've told myself that I'm misattributing that arousal, and I'm interpreting my heart beating fast as fear. But what if I changed my cognition? What if I said, that's not fear, that's excitement? Then could I have a different experience? So we can play with these things a little bit. This study is all the facial feedback hypothesis. And what I would do if we were in class, that I won't do right now, is I would invite you to either put a pencil in your mouth like this or a pencil up in your lip like this. And if you look at the muscles involved, you'll see that these promote or prevent different facial expressions. So in condition 1, we have this person who's almost forced into a smile. And in condition 2, this person who is not allowed to smile, because if she smiles, she's going to drop the pencil. And so I would show a funny video. Both of these are funny videos. And then I would ask all the participants who had been randomly assigned to either put the pencil this way or this way. And I'd invite them to rate how funny the video was. And the theory suggests that those who have the pencil this way, whose mouths are forced into a smile, are going to rate it as funnier than those who were not allowed to smile. And why? Because our facial expressions reflect emotion. And so as we, so we'll interpret, oh, I'm smiling, this must be funny, even if our mouths are forced into a smile. And so you can try that sometime when you're feeling grouchy. Try smiling, and let your facial feedback stem back to you and impact your emotional state. And then a question that interested me when I first came to study psychophysiology is whether other body regions manifest our habitual emotions. So the fact that someone has a back pain in a certain area may well represent just that they've been doing a lot of lifting, but do pains in certain areas of our body or stiffness in certain areas of our body, could they represent emotions that we tend to hold in or emotions that we haven't allowed to flow? So that's a question that I would ask, and that relates to this study about the facial feedback and emotion. So this is the last content here, beyond cognitive consistency to broader rationalization. So you might remember in last class, just world theory. The system justification theory is similar to that. It's like a rationalization of things that are unfair in the world around us. So in the just world theory, a person might hold a belief that their own status happened to them because they're good people. In other words, they hold a belief, good people get good things. And so then if they hold that belief, they can assume that people who don't have those things are not good people. That if they were good people, they too would have those things. And it helps relieve dissonance between what might otherwise be perceived as an unfair system. So that was the just world theory. System justification theory is really the same thing. I have an example here about pets. So the first cognition that we have is the world should be fair. And I put pets. Pets should be treated equally. That's a belief that someone has. And then cognition 2, the world is highly unequal. Many cats get to roam around freely while dogs are always tied up. So the idea is that we have dissonance. Cognition 1, pets should be treated equally, is dissonant with cognition 2. The world is highly cats get to roam freely, but dogs are tied up. So this person has to resolve that by rationalizing. But dogs have so many chances to go visiting, go on picnics, and cats don't have that, So that's the example of rationalization used to justify an unfair system. And so that's the same as the just world theory, except that the cognitions in just world theory are good people have good things, and the potentially dissonant cognition might be You know, but on the other hand, you know, everything is unfair out here. And so they resolve it by saying, well, therefore I must be a good person and other people must not be very good if they don't have good things. And the second point I'll make here, your book touches on this, is terror management theory. One of my colleagues at Dickinson studied this a bit. He wasn't one of the main researchers, but he did a little bit of work in this. He was interested in what happened when people face the reality of their own death. And I would have been interested to talk to you folks about it, actually. So death is a scary thing. Most people are afraid of it. And so what do we do when that threat becomes real, when death is looking us in the face? And typically we might connect to other people in our own in-group, and we might connect with other people who share our ideas and our worldview. That tends to be what people do. They get closer to their in-group. I've always, thought that I live far away from my family, and I've always thought that if we were in some sort of a national crisis, a war or something, I think what I would do above all that I can think of is I would do everything I could to get with my family, my children and my grandchildren. I would want to be with them. And so I can see it, I can read it inside myself, that might be how I would manage terror, but I think it wouldn't be for me as much as it would be that I would want to protect them. I think that would be what I was feeling. So mortality salience, this is the name for a type of study that involves getting people to think about their own death. It typically has a prompt like this: briefly describe the emotions that the thought of your own death arouses in you. And then jot down as specifically as you can what you think will happen to you as you physically die. So it's a rough prompt, but that's what they do to get people to contemplate their own death so they can see, well, what kinds of things happen. And in that case, we see a lot of certain effects. We see this glomming onto the in-group. We see people tightening up their own views and getting closer to tightening on their initial views and the people who share those views. And even people tending to support presidents who threaten war when terrorists attack in the situation where we've aroused worry or awareness of their own, death, eventual death. So that's it. I've already talked about the reflection, and I'll tease it out a little bit and write it down. And I'm eager to see what you do with it. Thanks for tuning into this last bit.